Hello everyone, it's Yogesh here. As part of the final assignment of the course Human Factors in AI, which is offered by Duke University and Coursera, I will be covering two areas. First, we will look into designing the user experience. We'll focus on the key AI specific considerations. And secondly, the ethical and privacy implications of machine learning product. Since the machine learning relies on large datasets to identify the patterns and formulates the rules, its development is always based on the choices of the researchers involved or variety of data available. This gives rise to one of the major problems with machine learning systems, the bias. Similarly, using personal details like health stats, financial spendings, etc., without consent and drawing the inferences could impact the legitimate usage of data. Now, this means that inferences drawn from such data by AI models might incorporate the biases or inequitable practices, and the use of models trained on these datasets could reinforce or amplify discriminatory edifices. As in the auto industry, we have seen the car manufacturers, they have been actually calling back automobile units with faulty systems, softwares, controls, some of which could be so severe that can affect the safety of passengers or people on road. Similarly, in the life sciences industry, we sometimes come across untoward and undesirable medical occurrence in a patient, which may occur while administering medicines. These are the adverse events which must be reported back to manufacturer and the regulatory agencies. This helps to better understand the risk associated with the use of medicines and to take steps which can safeguard the health of people. The process which we have chosen for our project is representing a very high level abstract of the adverse event reporting process. It is very complex process as the information which we call it as case, its intake happens through multiple channels such as case can be reported over phone call, fax, social media, paper form, etc. This case information further goes through lot of assessments and reviews before these are reported to regulatory agency. Generally, a lot of information is reported around the medicines over different channels, and thus it becomes a challenging task to filter these cases that carries the adverse event. The process is generally manual, and thus any misses, even accidentally, can have negative implications like financial penalties or impacting the brand reputation. Also, as the medicines portfolio expands, it becomes more important to keep a tab on such cases, which help to take calculated timely actions for betterment of patients' health. Now let's look at the key steps from the adverse event reporting process, which is generally managed over the case management systems. As we understood that the reviewer has to comb through cases daily, it appears as a good opportunity to implement a machine learning system which is trained on reported adverse events. Though there are standard terms and classes defined for adverse events, but generally the undesired outcomes are described in general language by the reporters, and thus it becomes challenging to identify the adverse events from the reported narratives. In our use case, we have multiple stakeholders. The journey starts from the patient, and much of the information revolves around the data collected from the patient. Then we have case reviewers who are the gatekeepers to check the incoming information and look for adverse event cases. These adverse event cases are then passed to medical reviewers for final assessments, which is then submitted to regulatory agencies. Since we are introducing a machine learning based module to assist the case reviewers, it becomes important that we make it transparent to all the engaged stakeholders. As we are consuming part of the data coming from patient, we need to address several questions during the triggering point of this journey. What data will be captured? Why all this data is required? Where this will be stored and for how long? Supporting patient with updated consent forms during data collection, explaining what is mandatory and what is desired data, what choices he can make around sharing data back with the system will build more confidence into the system. Similarly, for the reviewers and audit purposes, how I maintain the uh, training data sets, how the key features and labels are identified required for modeling, how the conclusion or recommendations are made by the ML system. Do we have weights or other inputs like ranking that explains why specific information is identified as adverse event case? As the system focus on providing a seamless automation solution to the case reviewer, we must keep a tab as how and what data flows from input case to machine learning system. Now, as patient come across a lot of interaction points where data is being requested, stored for different purposes, which also carries sensitive personal information, financial information, health records, it raises a strong need to govern the process and systems. This is where the regulators like FDA, EMA, other regional or national drug regulatory agencies have set up guidelines and rules that must be adhered and implemented to address privacy concerns while devising such systems. HIPAA, GDPR, and similar other privacy regulations are also strongly set up to ensure the security of the individual data. Now, as part of our solution, you can see the proposed process flow and newly introduced adverse event ML detection component, which will be a symbol of models trained on different features and weights. This solution is devised following the previously uh, discussed data privacy considerations and compliance guidelines. As part of the proposed process flow, the case data, which carries the sensitive personal information and other inputs, are segregated into two data flows. Only reported description or the narrative will be input to AEML detection component to get the case assessed for the adverse events. Also, as there could be a risk that machine learning model misses detecting any new adverse event, such cases will pass through a manual check where case reviewer will label the data and pass the case in next stage if any adverse event is identified. This labeled data will be reviewed and used for further training the machine learning model to improve the model's coverage. Now, as part of designing a solution, apart from people, we also need to holistically look at other two areas. The first one, process and policy, and the second is technology. Now, from processes and policies perspective, we need to clearly document and define data retention, retrainings, periodic reviews and assessments, uh, detecting any data drifts, right? On the technology side, we need to set the technical controls to manage data privacy, data consistency and quality, allowing legitimate and informed usage of data. To handle the critical and personal data, ensure the encryption layers are applied while storing and handling data. Also, have supporting systems and practices in place to manage versions of machine learning models and versions of training and validation sets. Now, let's also focus on the biases that we may face around the adverse event use case. First one is representation bias. This can occur if training data is taken only for adverse events reported around specific therapeutic areas and medicines. To eliminate this bias, we must consider the training data for all the therapeutic areas and medicines which are available in the market from the company. However, the model will become more efficient as it starts learning from the feedback loop. Now, second is the deployment bias. This points to the legitimate use of available data. To manage it, the outcomes and objective of the model shall be clearly defined and monitored. In this use case, the personal data is not used in the model, which could have done inferences on individual's health. Now, while taking the solution approach, we shall ensure that the three goals are encouraged, understood, and followed by the teams and implemented during the designing of this automation system, covering the entire process flow. Now, wrapping up with the conclusion, as we see more and more use of AI ML based applications in our daily life, starting from analyzing our sleep to managing our diet. it becomes highly important to embed fairness, accountability, and transparency during the early stage of designing the application so that it is non-invasive and ethical to explain the outcomes while consuming our personal data. I hope this represent I hope this presentation has been informative for you. Please like and comment. Thank you.